Of the 240 people at the Season 2 finals in Japan, 2 people brought Blue-Purple Sanji, and one of them was able to make top cut. Blue-Purple Sanji is a deck that's going to be receiving massive buffs when both EB03 and EB04 are allowed to be used, but still in Japan, with only EB03 with the 5 cost ratio, this card alone has been enough to make this deck viable. If this deck can get this far in a tournament of only the best players in Japan, imagine how good it may end up being once you get the full support with things like Stealth Black. This matchup is going to be Toji on Ime, who actually was the Swiss winner going undefeated, and his list honestly is very simple. Now fighting against Blue-Purple Sanji, a matchup that he surely doesn't know very well. Is he going to be able to pull it out again and make it to the top 4, or is he going to fall to this rogue deck? Blue-Purple Sanji, on the other hand, is playing a very unique list, which is only possible thanks to the EB03 Reiju. This card effectively allowing you to play any event out of your trash, puts in a lot of work and makes this deck very, very unique in the way that it functions. However, because you're going against Ime, a lot of these really powerful cards like Red Rock and like Gravity Blade are not going to be helpful because all of the opponent's characters cannot be removed by effects. Still, let's see how Sanji holds up against this top tier deck in our top 8 match for the Season 2 finals. Now, starting off, we have a look at Ime's hand. Now, interestingly, I have experience with both of these decks, but I have not played Blue-Purple Sanji in quite a while, and I definitely haven't played it with the new EB03 support, so I may be a bit rusty in some of my knowledge on Blue-Purple Sanji. It is still a very unique and interesting deck, so I'll try my best to commentate over it. Ime has a somewhat underwhelming starting hand. You don't really need War Curie, especially in a matchup like this, where you don't necessarily need to be defending that much, or actually that hard, honestly. And while you do have Saturn, the other cards are really cards that you want later on. The opponent's attacks don't get really big until much later when they get a bunch of cards in their trash, so that plus 3k event isn't going to really be too helpful. Looking at Sanji's hand, it's a bit of a similar story. There's some good cards, you have a couple of searches, but when half the deck is searches, I don't really think that you need this kind of hand. Still, going to think it through, Sanji does really want to find that 3-cost Sanji early on because there aren't too many times to play it out due to just not having Stealth Black quite yet. So I would be surprised to decide to keep this, but we may have just missed a little bit of context. This may also have been past the mulligan because it looks like we're just going to get straight into game with these starting hands. Both hands, honestly, maybe not the best, but Ime does have the benefit of being able to just cycle them. Probably just going to immediately get rid of that War Curie, just hopefully look for some 1-cost searchers to get the ball rolling. Doesn't find it, finds another counter event. Sanji, on the other hand, don't know if he decided to keep this hand or not, but is going to be starting with Luffy is the man who will become king of the pirates to check the top 3, and interestingly he can choose any card and not have to show it to the opponent. So picks up Konkase, I believe, sends the rest of the cards to the bottom, including that new EB03 Reiju. That card isn't going to be as helpful in this matchup, so we'll really have to see how Sanji has prepared for this matchup, because surely he knew that he was going to hit this at some point. Uses the Konkase immediately and just draws 1 card, just trying to get his trash up a little bit and cycle through his deck. Turn coming back to Ime. Ime doesn't have too much to do on this turn, is just going to keep cycling out those cards. Picks up another counter event, though thankfully he did get rid of that plus 3k event, so it's more or less a net positive just in terms of counter that you got, but he's not necessarily finding the cards that he wants, particularly those 1-cost searchers to start to fill up your trash really quickly. This may actually give Sanji a pretty unique opportunity to actually be able to take out Ime's board if Ime fails to find something like that search event off of Saturn. And Sanji, though, having a pretty nice start. We were worried about if he was going to be able to find this 3-cost Sanji, but the trigger on Let's Crash the Wedding is going to help him find that Sanji and definitely make his turns a lot easier from this next turn. We're probably going to see him playing out that Sanji immediately and seeing exactly what this leader is capable of with the leader effect. Plays out the Sanji for 3-dong, use the leader effect, and now he's allowed to play any 3-cost or less Straw Hat event, and he's going to pick Buhubastel. Because he has 6 or less cards in his hand, is just going to draw 2 cards. Basically just Sanji's PLF for free. And yes, he did have to pay that -1 dong, but now that he is at 3 dong, compared to the opponent's 3 dong, he's going to be able to regain that immediately on attack. So really good start from Sanji, and Ime also getting a trigger of his own to search. So both of these players who had a rather unfortunate starting hand are just going to keep filtering and filtering with all of the searches that they have at their disposal to find the cards that they need. Both players in this matchup are basically playing decks that have completely immune boards. The 3-cost Sanji, if you try to KO it, the opponent can simply just reduce 1 dong. And same goes with Emu, your cards just simply cannot be removed once you get 7 cards in your trash. And that trigger is probably going to benefit Emu a lot more, honestly. He was able to get that trigger, which now puts him to 5 cards in his trash, which diminishes the chances that Sanji's going to have of being able to actually get rid of the opponent's board. We also see that there's a search event in Emu's hand as well, so for sure he's going to get to that 7-card threshold to get out of that range and to make sure that his board's going to start sticking. Goes for the search first. Nasuchiro, Peter, and Mars. Already has a Mars in his hand, not necessarily very good in this matchup, so he's deciding between the 2K and the Rush, but decides to pick up the 2K. Defense is valuable here, can also be used just on the board as well as a aggressive tempo tool. Fills up his trash now at 8, and likely is just going to play out that Saturn search and just get the snowball rolling and find his pieces. Both of these players have been able to stabilize a rather rough starting hand. Uses the empty throne, and for 3 dong, Saturn is going to be coming out. Now, what do you really want in this matchup? He wants something that he could play next turn. He doesn't have anything great in his hand except for that Warcry, which he has been holding on to. He does see another Saturn. He actually sees multiple. So he may just want to pick up this Saturn because that does seem like the generic better play than Warcry, but he does also have Nasuchiro as his option. But Nasuchiro is really better when the opponent rests their cards, and for Sanji, I don't really know if he's going to actually end up resting his cards anytime soon, considering how weak they are in the early game and how much stronger they become later on. Thinking about the Saturn and decides to pick it up. So, yep, that's going to be the Saturn to hand and probably one of the better plays next turn. Even though you have things like that Nasuchiro in your hand, you don't get too much value out of it quite yet. And Sanji, with the way that his leader effect, or not leader effect, the deck works, has a lot of counter events. You see the 2 Gom Giants as well as Konkase. All of those cards are technically plus 4k counters. And in this way, Sanji's just really hard to actually kill. So, yeah. Just going to start his turn with the pudding search, just digging further and further into his deck. Sanji's just trying to fill up his board with the 3-cost Sanjis, and decides to pick up Gravity Blade. Potentially, maybe not very many good targets in that search. Didn't see too many, but we saw a couple of things that just weren't simply weren't searchable by pudding. So, just picks up the Gravity Blade, just probably going to look to get rid of that at some point. Uses Konkase to draw 1 more card. This, I mean, although it is just draw 1, which feels rather underwhelming when the counter effect is a plus 4k counter, it does get a card into your trash. And for Sanji, who now has, I believe, 5 events in trash, 6 actually, with that Konkase now Sanji is at 6k. Sanji, for every 5 events in your trash, is going to get plus 1000 power. So just trying to get his trash a little bit bigger, bit by bit. Konkase number 4 shown this game. Going to get another card into his trash as well as filter 1 more card. And looks like he picked up a Reiju. Yeah, the 4-cost Reiju. And is going to play out another Sanji. So this is ideal from Sanji. Maybe you would want to see some other cards like Buhubasu to play off of your leader effect. But is going to start lining up these 3-cost Sanjis, which is exactly what it wants to do. And this is a very unique card. Karene is a 1-cost blocker if you have 4 or more events in your trash. And Sanji, who now has 7, is absolutely past this point. So this is effectively just a 1-cost blocker with 1k counter, which works very well with Sanji's leader effect. Now, if Sanji decides to rest his 3-cost Sanjis at some point, this Karene may come in handy to actually just defend against some of those attacks and keep his board as healthy as possible. But Sanji deciding not to attack with the 3-cost Sanji quite yet because they just aren't really at the point that he wants to start resting them, because there's so many things in Imu's deck that can exploit that, Nasuchiro being that main one. Okay, now Imu on this 7-dong turn, he does have technically a couple of options at his disposal. He actually has every single Gorose that he needs already, and just deciding what he really wants to play on this turn. That 6-cost Nasuchiro doesn't seem too effective right now, but it could just be used as a simple rush card if you think that Sanji just doesn't have that many 1Ks and 2Ks in his deck. You would be correct. Sanji does tend to have this issue where you have so many events that you just can't defend against 5K attacks. But it does seem a bit risky, especially if you're not sure exactly how Sanji works, to go for a play like that. Starts at the 5K, doesn't need to commit to anything quite yet, and if the opponent does anything but a simple 1K counter here, it could give you a lot of information on exactly what's in Sanji's hand. And he takes it. This is a huge indication to Toji that he does not have a pretty decent counter. Whether it's a 2K that he doesn't want to get rid of quite yet, or he simply doesn't have it, this gives a lot of information, and Toji is going to go for the ground death. Oh! The Mars is actually so strong. I completely forgot about this because it's not a matchup that I don't play. By nullifying the effect of Sanji, that Sanji's protection is no longer available and therefore is now in the range of Mars. Mars, being able to KO a 5 cost or less, can now affect the Sanji who has no effect and gets rid of Sanji's board. This is actually pretty devastating for Sanji, who really needs those 3-cost Sanjis to actually be able to finish out the game, because honestly, that's kind of the only attacker that this deck has, and without Stealth Black, that card's going to be gone forever. Still, unfazed, is going to just keep trying to fill up his trash, playing towards the game plan that he knows, and trying his best in this really difficult matchup. I didn't even consider the possibility of Ground Death plus Mars, but that's really bad, where he could have had 3 Sanjis on this turn. He now only has 2, and although he is able to pump up his characters on his board with that big trash, without too many attackers, it doesn't feel all too powerful quite yet. It does have more than 10 events in trash now though, so those Sanjis are getting bigger, but losing that one Sanji in a really unfortunate way is going to suck. And now I understand why he picked up the Mars from that search. That was just an oversight from me. Still though, with things like that Kaya, he is going to be able to, first of all, filter out that Gravity Blade he was forced to draw off of the Pudding search, but also fill up his trash with more and more events. And although Ima is still very, very healthy because Sanji doesn't have the ability to actually put on any pressure, I mean, Sanji's also relatively healthy as well if you look at the massive hand that he has, but is it really going to be enough? Imu just is a deck that really wants time, and he's not really getting it. And I think Sanji identifies that, decides to go for 7K at leader. If he gives Imu enough time, he's inevitably going to win, so he needs to get these attacks in where he can. Even if it's risky to rest Sanji at this point, he needs to get in these 7K swings to force the opponent to use counter. Gets the Never Existed and uses 3 Dong to put on Pudding and hit for another 5K, hoping that the opponent is going to be forced to take it or defend with one of the very few counter cards that he has left in his hand. If he counters out of hand, then he doesn't really have that many great things he could play next turn potentially. So he's probably thinking about if it's worth it to just give this Saturn up, or if he should just take the attack and hold on to the cards and options that he has in his hand. Decides to counter with the Saturn, just giving a 1K, is now going to go to 2 cards in his hand after this draw is going to be at 3 now, I believe. And does pick up the Shadia, so is going to be able to filter and search a little bit more, get him that much closer to the Empty Thrones plus 1K to leader effect. But what do you want to do on this turn? Now, Ima's a lot of the time, if they decide that they want to ramp up the pressure, they can play Peter on this turn. But the thing is, I think that in this matchup against Sanji, you don't really need to ramp up the pressure. All you have to do is basically survive, and inevitably you should end up winning if you can just keep hitting the opponent with these small attacks that you have on the board. Yes, Sanji does have some really powerful cards, like this Sanji that's going to keep getting bigger and bigger over the course of the game. Because he doesn't have that many attacks in the early game, Ima can very safely and consistently get to 10 Dong with 3 or more life a lot of the time. But still, Ima deciding to go for the slightly more aggressive play doesn't really have that many other plays in his hand, to be honest. So plays down that Peter, is going to make all of his characters 7,000 power on his turn as long as that Peter exists. Goes for the 7K at leader, and maybe for Sanji he prefers a 7K over a 5K because he can actually just use his counter events a little bit easier. But he takes it, and he gets a trigger. The second Let's Crash the Wedding of the game is going to search 5 once more. We've already seen 3 Sanjis, one of them has died, but is he going to see a 4th one? It's hard to see from the glare on the cards. We see a Gum Gum Rain, not a card that you see all too often, but that trigger effect makes it a little bit better than Gum Gum Gatling within this deck. Also see a Gum Gum Giant, and it does seem like he picked up that Gum Gum Giant. So now I believe the third Gum Gum Giant in his hand. Alexa, he doesn't need that life because he just has an insane amount of counter. Is that 4 Gum Gum Giants in his hand? He has so much counter. So if he can manage to find that 3-cost Sanji, he may be able to stall enough time to just bully Imu just enough to get that attack through. Imu being at 9 dong right now, I believe, yes, is going to be able to play that 10-cost Gorose next turn. And I mean, once that Gorose comes down, you're playing 2 blockers every single turn. Even if the opponent has 2 really big attacks from the Sanji, you're not making too much progress. So Sanji really needs to get a couple more attackers on the board. But Tolji, deciding if he wants to go for this last hit with Mars, does he want to be aggressive with the Peter that he just played, or does he want to play somewhere in the middle, leaving this Mars as a blocker? He only has 1 card in his hand, which means that either he has to get rid of this 10-cost Gorose in his hand, or he's just going to be using this to fill up his trash. Because you have to trash 1 card after you play Charlia, essentially this is just going to filter 1 card. The cards that he sees in this search are not actually going to matter. So picks up the Saturn, kind of out of etiquette, and immediately trashes it with that Charlia effect, uses leader effect to get 1 draw. So did just filter 1 card, but importantly, I believe now is at 19 cards in trash, which means that Ima is now going to be 6k on his turn. So with 1 dong on leader, this is now going to be a 7k hit if he decides to go for it at leader. So just trying to keep hitting at 7k to bully Sanji as much as possible, but uses the Divine Departure. Interestingly, the Roger Divine Departure, one that is a plus 3k event if you trash 1 card, and also has the main effect to be able to reduce one of the opponent's character's power as well. Pretty surprising tech card that you don't see all too often in Sanji that could definitely catch a lot of decks, like Ace for example, off by surprise when they rest things like that 10 cost. Still, decides to leave that Mars up, trying to be a little bit cautious. Don't know how aggressively he's allowed to be in this matchup. This is one of the benefits of playing a rogue deck. The opponent doesn't know the limits that they're allowed to go to. They don't know if they need to be safe. They don't know if they have to be aggressive. They're kind of just playing what they think is right at the moment. And right now, Tolji thinks that he needs to be a little bit more defensive, hitting at 7k with the character and leader, and leaving Mars active, potentially to use as a blocker. Still, Shou, his probably 19th search at this point, is going to find that 4th 3-cost Sanji. Call it a high roll. This is just what blue-purple Sanji does. He goes through his entire deck, finds every single Sanji, and makes sure that they're all on the board. So he has successfully found all 4 Sanji, but unfortunately only 3 are going to be able to stay on the board. So essentially Sanji just needs to find a way, somehow, some way, to be able to beat Imu with the Sanjis that are on the board and the leader effect, or leader attack that he has. Still, with his leader effect, is going to draw 2 more cards, staying as healthy as possible with Buhu Bastel. Now at 15 cards in his trash, these Sanjis are now at 8,000 power. The 5k hit defended with 1k, and now with only 1 card left in Imu's hand, even if you're not in the perspective that we're in, you have to assume that that's going to be the 10-cost Gorose. So knows that he probably doesn't have that much counter left, so he may just be able to attach 3 dong to Pudding and chip away again at 5k because he just countered that attack. That 5k would end up going through and would definitely help in this race that Sanji is trying to propose. So what I imagine Shou, the blue-purple Sanji, is probably thinking about right now is if he wants to use the dong for the effects that he has in his hand, whether it's Luffy's the man will become king of the pirates, or Pudding, and use the extra dong for counter events, or if he just wants to get this 1 extra hit in. But it seems like he's going to go for that 5k hit. Does have the read that the opponent doesn't have any counter in his hand. That card must be the 10-cost Gorose. So this 5k swing is going to be hugely beneficial, is going to be able to break through and get Imu down to 2 life. Somehow, some way, Sanji is ripping through Imu's resources in a pretty substantial way right now. That ground death into Mars on the early turn was devastating to Sanji, but it did also make him lose 3 cards from his hand as well, and we may be seeing the ripple effect of that. Now, going for the 8k is going to be taken, and this last 8k is going to be defended by Mars. So, correct decision to leave that Mars up, because otherwise Imu would have to go into his 10 dong turn with 0 life, which is really not where he wants to be. But sacrifices Mars, sacrifices 1 attack to make sure that that doesn't actually end up happening. Stays as healthy as possible to go into this 10-cost Gorose turn, and now it's going to be a matter of if he can do it multiple times in a row. he may be able to finish out the game with just one, at least from his perspective. But with the amount of Gum Gum Giants in Blue Purple Sanji's hand, it doesn't matter if he goes down to 2 dong, he will be able to make sure that he has as much counter as he needs. So Toji needs to be really careful about how he approaches this situation. If he goes for lethal too early, Blue Purple Sanji, who has an insane amount of defense, will be able to defend it. Toji must be cautious, be careful in this situation to make sure that he actually can get through the attacks. And the best way to do that is to just keep chipping away at Sanji's resources. The question is just going to be, is he going to have enough? Goes for the 7k first, see how the opponent responds, and you probably just use one of your Gum Gum Giants here. Ideally, you don't want to use multiple Gum Giants on the same turn because you're going to go to less than 10 dong. So it uses the first one here while it's still relatively free and picks up another Boohoo Basta, it seems. Okay, now a 7k attack coming out from Peter at the opponent's leader again. If Sanji doesn't block this, yeah, he decides to block it. If he doesn't block this, then the Gorose that will play out the 6-cost Mars will just be able to KO it for free. So the last possible time that he has to be able to use that Carnet that he played so early on in the game finally does his job and defends an attack. The 7k attack is going to be absorbed, but that does mean that right now, Blue Purple Sanji is completely exposed. 0 blockers on the board, 0 life, but an insane amount of counter in his hand. See if Toji decides to go for it and potentially lose on the spot, or if he decides to be slow in the situation. He does see that 10-cost Gorose, so he may just be able to play one more turn. He can bring the Nasjiro, Mars, Peter, or the 10-cost Gorose. That Ground Death is not going to be a target for him. The Nasjiro could be a good option to just get in a couple of extra hits, which against Sanji in particular would be very nice, as the deck is very good at defending higher thresholds, but is not necessarily as good at defending against small chip attacks, but decides to pick up the Peter, once again prioritizing the defensive capabilities of those cards. Before we saw him leave Mars active as a blocker, and now we're seeing him pick up that 2k over something like the 10-cost Gorose, which indicates to me that he's expecting to finish the game next turn. Yeah, it seems like Toji is not taking the bait, is just going to go for 9k at the opponent's leader while reducing Sanji. So now the Sanji is at 6k, but Sanji using the second Gum Gum Giant on this turn, meaning that next turn he's going to start with 8. Uses the 1k from Reiju to now be able to defend that attack. And Ima, I mean, he can take out this Sanji, but there's really no reason to when the opponent's 5k and 0 life. And Toji really thinking about what could potentially be here. He only has 1 counter event in his hand, so logically you only need to leave up 1, technically 2, if you think that that last life may be a counter event to be safe this next turn. But I mean, what does Sanji have? You have to think back into your memory. Does blue or purple have ways to rest Dong? Surely not, right? But you can never be too sure. Deciding, just making sure, exhausting every option that he has to make sure that he doesn't make any mistakes here. Does seem like he's going to elect to do that. Only attaches 2 Dong to his leader and swings for 8k, which is going to be very easy to defend. But Sanji, refusing to give a Gum Gum Giant, is just going to dump his hand and holds on to the Otama 2k. Dumps 4 1ks out of his hand to hold on to that Otama, because he may need that to find his last out. What might that be? Things like Usohachi come to mind. I don't know if there's any other cards that can remove the opponent's Warcury. Does also have Brochette Blows in his hand, which with his leader effect will be able to draw him 1 more card. So maybe with this Otama and Brochette Blows, he's going to be able to dig into his deck to find something that can get rid of the opponent's blocker. And I think that that's the only out that he has right now. He just needs to find some way, somehow, to get past the opponent's blocker. Does seem to be the way that he is playing with this Otama that he held onto, and try to go for lethal on this turn. How close is he to getting his characters to 9k? This is also going to be really important. If he's like 1 card away, then that Brochette Blow is going to actually make a difference. But if not, he may still just need to try to break through with these Sanjis at 8k. Starts with the 5k at leader, and because he's at less Dong the opponent due to using multiple Gum Gum Giants, is going to get 1 Dong back. And because he got this Dong back from his leader effect, will immediately be able to use the Brochette Blow effectively for free, gets 1 draw. Is that another Otama? So he can keep digging if he chooses to. And maybe the cards that Otama drops into trash will be enough to get Sanji up to 20. No, Sanji's already at 20, so Now Sanji at 9,000 power. If he finds anything, he's looking for it. What does he find? What does he find? I can't tell. Drops a Gungam Giant, doesn't matter anymore. Has more searchers just looking desperately through his deck. Anything at this point. It must be Usohachi. And there it is. The Usohachi. It's the one out that he has. God, he must run that at really low counts. We haven't seen it at all in this entire game. Picks up that Usohachi. And Toji thinking, does he have enough counter? Does he have enough right now? He has a 2k, 2k, and a 3k. But the opponent's board is a base 9k right now. There's only 3 attacks. So he has to have every single attack go through. And from Sanji, from Sanji's perspective, he just has to go for it at this point. He has to rest one of the opponent's blockers in that Warcury and get all 3 attacks through. But, I mean, from our perspective, we know the insane amount of counter in Uma's hand is not going to mean that that's possible. Still, Sanji doesn't know that yet, and he has to go for it. This is the one option that he has now. He did unfortunately have to use quite a bit of his dong to actually find that Usohachi, and he's going to have to use 3 more to actually play it out. But this is the one out that he has, the one chance that he has at winning this game, and he did manage to find it. So he's going to hope that it's enough. Rests the Warcury with that Usohachi, goes to the 9k at leader. He has 3 dong left at his disposal. He can hit 4, 10, and 11 with the cards that he has left. And unfortunately, no matter which way you put it, Toji does have enough counter in his hand. And he's just deciding when he wants to use it. The best thing for him, honestly, is to just make sure that Sanji uses all of his dong so that he has no chance of surviving next turn. We know that this has to be the last turn. He used so much counter in the turn before to defend. And 9k once again, Toji once again deciding how much he wants to bait the opponent into going for lethal. He has a lot of counter in his hand, but he doesn't know, is there some card that I don't know about in Sanji's deck? But unfortunately, there is nothing that's going to surprise him. It's going to be 3 dong. It's going to hit for 12,000, and Ima, with an insane amount of counter in his hand, is going to be able to defend it, meaning that the turn comes back to Ima. Nothing left at Sanji's disposal. No dong up, no blockers, no life. Once again, like the top 32 match, Ima is going to slam Sanji for 17,000 to win the game and move on to top 4.